And with that, we're just diving straight into it. Good evening, good morrow, and good morning. Welcome back to whatever the fuck this is going to be. I've ensnared the metalist daddy of them all for some delicious conversation. How are you doing today, my good brother?
Tired. Just got done with a shrine for the Shriners International Shrine event, where we had an installation go on, and I was just voluntold that I could be possibly the social media manager for the Crescent Shrine.
All right. See, I love when responsibilities are doled out rather than, asked.
Oh
That's
yeah,
just like
yes, yes, doled, yes, yes.
this is our favorite verb, especially in the voluntold is it's one of the passwords in case you didn't know.
Delegation.
Delegation. It's leadership, management, and training. I promise, darling. Take the orders. No, today we are gathered to talk about one of my favorite things, one of the most controversial topics today, and that is religion. Orbiting
Ooh,
around.
one of the two things we're not supposed to talk about in lodge. How
Mhm.
how dare you?
How dare, but in case you didn't know, there was no Tyler at the door. We are not in lodge. We are free vagabonds upon the digital easterly road. I'm going to get in trouble for this later, but welcome, welcome.
The opinions of this podcast reflect only the hosts themselves and do not reflect that of any grand, large body or appendant anything, ever.
As we delve into this topic of why is religion needed, we're going to have some fun discussion. But one thing is, at no point in time is this a aspect for conversion. Is this a debate about is a religion right or wrong, but merely conceptually and culturally, how does religion fit into life? How does this fit? How does this work for us? So, brother, first, let me ask you, what is religion? How do you define religion?
For myself, I like to separate the idea of religion versus spirituality,
Okay.
mainly because I came from a religious background, that of Roman Catholicism. And to me, religion requires a set of rules and norms that have specific meaning within that religion. And I think that goes for any of them out there, even some of the more free spirited like Wiccan or Norse pagan or something like that. There's still a bit of rule there. But just for simple sake, we'll go with the big three. There's always, one superior god, worship this one superior god, uh, sacrifice to this one superior god, whether that's your time or your money, or back in the day, literal animal sacrifice, possible human, depending on how far back you want to go. That sort of mentality. And then you are rewarded by either winning a battle or eternal life, um, any number of supposed good things will happen to you within this religion. And also, you are supposed to not only follow this set of rules, but if you do follow this set of rules, not only will you get these good things that happen to you, but you will be given morals that are supposed to be either passed down or also followed. Morals in this concept, to me, are just extensions of the rules that were given to you.
Okay. So I'd like to look into that because this I do think is really important, and that's that there is a connection because we can all agree to a certain level that there is a universal system or sense of morality that each individual person is owed a just due or is given a certain amount. And different religions especially offer really unique views at what these universal morals are. Because if you take Buddhism, if you take Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they have different classes. They have different classifications of being and believer and practitioner. And inherently, when you consider a community, this is something which is based on interconnectedness. But with religious systems, they seem to be connected into not necessarily segregation, but I would say they place emphasis upon classification.
Yes, again, going back to the entire rule aspect. Sadly, with the big three, there is a huge emphasis placed on the patriarchy. It is a man dominated or male dominated religion where the man is supposed to be doing the fighting, the the farming, the breadwinner, all that stuff, all those things that one would traditionally conservatively call manhood, which nowadays can be seen as toxic depending on the level at which one uh, attains those things.
So let me ask you the question almost just flat out. Do you think that religion is needed?
Needed? No,
Needed.
no,
Needed. No. Okay. So
no.
what's the grounds for that? What would we have if we didn't have religion?
I believe that in this time, since it's 2024 now, we have come far enough as a species to understand that the ground rules, so to speak, that were set forth by these religions 2,000 plus years ago were for a people that could not explain the world. So they did what they thought was the best thing at the time. They thought that if a woman were to lead, it could cause anger to this sublime being, and they didn't want to see that. They didn't want to see a drought happen. They didn't want to see their animals die or something like that. So they thought that as long as a man, again keeping with the patriarchy theme, a man was in charge, that it would keep this divine being satiated.
Okay.
Uh, Obviously, through scholarship, there have been um, things found that women obviously can be in leadership roles. Obviously, in the Bible, there are women disciples and teachers. Within Judaism, there's women teachers. Again, there is that separation, though. They only teach so much. They don't
Right.
teach what the other gender supposedly teaches.
Well, we kind of capitalize on this as in Freemasonry, the segregation of the sexes and the importance to the difference in how each gender or sex. These are words which I imagine today are used separately, but I'm going to kind of use them interchangeably.
Right.
But these two sexes have a different language. They have a different system for reception of divine
See now,
instruction.
and I don't disagree with that. Now, mind you, there are individuals within each gender or sex that are more receptive to the other form of teaching. If we're going to do this binary debate, I very much believe that there are those that can be taught through the other's viewpoint. But to keep it in a traditional sense, yes, a woman learns things faster, experiences more things at a rate higher than a male does. A person that considers themselves male, a person who is biologically male, whatever the definition is that you choose to use. And let's be honest, those of us that were born male, have something dangling between our legs right now, are stupid. Um, we do stupid crap. And there are certain lessons that we have to learn at a slower pace with bigger pictures and slower words.
Facts. I ain't gonna argue that. And anybody who does, if you got the swinging bits. Now, I think what I would not challenge is that what I would push back on is that where I feel like religion is driven from is this idea that there is a universal system or that there is an order to things. And so when we deal with the separation of the sexes, why do we have to separate that? Why do men learn one way and women learn another? Why is it that these rites of initiation occur physically within one and communally within another? I think that if we ask ourselves these questions, again, we get into why. There's a logical design behind it. We can go evolutionarily and evolutionally. I'm fucking that word up. It's there now. In that, but if we review our history, we could say that between the hunter gatherer and these different roles that they're developed as, but again, there was an intelligence behind it. I've read articles that detail how women can see more colors than men.
Yes, there's actually a genetic thing where a woman that is an XXY, right? Yeah, XXY Yeah, because double X is male. Had to go back to biology for a second. Sorry. If they have the XXY chromosome, they have I think it's like a 3% chance to have more cones in their eyes. So it's not going to be like
Women
not all this, they're
outright.
not all of a sudden mantis shrimp and they can see like 16 colors, but the variations on the colors that we see already are highlighted to them. They see
Right.
redder reds and bluer blues,
Right.
things like that.
Okay, so this is an example where I would say that in nature we have evidence that there is an intentionality behind the design, whether you emanate that that's from evolution, which we could still argue is coming from some point of grand intelligence or grand design or overarching theme of control. There's a reason for it. And
See, I wouldn't call it control, at least
okay,
through my belief.
all right, hit me with it.
Through my belief, I don't believe that there is a control. I believe there's, again, my personal belief, it's more of a science experiment, and whatever this intelligent design, whatever this intelligent design is, kind of made it, and it has stepped away and has no bearing on what is going on right now, and has given us enough of our own free will, free thought, independence to discover what it made.
So that's a really, I like that a lot, and I've read this a lot in different Sufi theologies, which is a very kind of like Gnostic form of Islam.
Sufis, I got a very brief overview of that from the Masonic Roundtable, actually. And that was really interesting to listen to.
Oh, dude. So, and for anybody who's interested, if you want, just like a morsel, it's a sexy little bite of information to go Google. So, in Freemasonry, we come from on paper the 1700s, but you could roll back and say clearly between the 13 to 1500s is where a lot of the formation of what we know comes from in regards to not necessarily orated tradition, but the structure we built upon of communal grouping within
What
a
we
trade guild.
appropriated, let's be
Right.
honest.
We appropriated it. We can accept this. And actually, so this is part of the discussion point, is that in Islam, the golden era was capitalized in the Ottoman
Right.
regime.
With all the sciences and everything, and the math and everything that came out of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that is a precursor to the age of enlightenment that we have in Europe that
Yes.
kind of, that picked it up. And so there's a unique relationship between Freemasonry as we have it today, or whereas we received it today in the modern 1700 perspective, and the foundation of the Sufi lodges, which basically did the same thing that Freemasons did today, except because there was a cohesion in the religion, that it was more like you didn't talk about politics because religion was the foundation.
Right. And I think a lot of the battle that goes on today via social media and politics is there's this very extreme ends of the spectrum of atheism versus evangelism for all
Yeah.
religions. Um, and it gets lost that, yes, Christianity, Islam, even Judaism, if you want to go as far as that, hell, even some of the sects within Buddhism, there was fighting. There's
Yeah.
always going to be war. We are humans.
Yeah.
But there was also parts of enlightenment. Okay, Galileo was protested by the church, but he was also a devout follower. Isaac Newton was a devout follower. And even though he did all this scientific exploration, they did it in the name of God.
So let me go back to your point where when we asked this question of is religion needed, the sciences by which society has so much benefited from have come from the minds of those religiously devoted who had faith to go beyond what their mind could not rationalize or comprehend. Like it always seems where we see intellectual progress, it is bridged by, I wouldn't necessarily say spiritual movement, but I would say a religious devotion.
So again, it goes back to my thought of the extremes. In today's world, there is too much of the two extremes. There is no commonality, common ground anymore. We don't peacefully coexist with one another in the realm of religion. You have the hyper vigilant, everything has to be by the book, this is my interpretation of my religion type, who are not scholars. They are just everyday schlubs like you and I,
Yeah.
who don't know the language even that their holy texts came from. Hell, there are Hasidic Jewish men that I know who can't speak Hebrew, can't read it, but they're carrying around Torahs that are Hebrew. Like,
Right.
they only know the prayers that they were taught when they went through school.
Wow.
They don't know the Aleph base.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing can be said of Christians, where they don't understand the context of where a story or a psalm or something like that came from. Well, I can't speak that much on Islam. I don't know that
Oh
much.
no, and actually, so here's the fun part about Islam. Like it's specifically called out in the faith by the prophet. He says, like, y'all, you guys are gonna get attacked and attacked so viciously, like the way people invite like others to the dinner table. They're like,
Mm,
well, why the fuck is that? Well, will there be so few of us? And they're like, nah, there will be so many of you bastards that you'll be easy to pick on because none of you will actually know what it is that you're following.
right,
And that
right.
shit's terrifying to me. Like, not
It says the same thing in the Bible. It says this, it says you should pray in secret. You shouldn't be out on the streets evangelizing. That's not the way. Sure, go out and save someone, but don't do it in a way where you're trying to make a big deal out of it.
right. So yeah, okay, this gets into the root of what I think is let's look at we're gonna go to our sponsor today, slash not sponsored of chat GPT, get my letters correctly, and go to one of the first questions generated. So I asked Chat GPT, I'm like, give me some thought-provoking doodles to think about. And this is what we got.
A
So
non-biased view, a third party, if you
yeah,
will.
that's right. That's right. We were supposed to have another brother here, stares at the camera intensively. Um,
You
and
down
since he's
there.
that's right, you know you fucking there. So our first question today is going to be, brother, how do you believe that the presence or absence of religion impacts an individual's moral compass and ethical decision making in today's diverse and interconnected world? There's a fucking mouthful for you.
I feel that because the world is so connected right now and we get our information so quickly, that one hits too many stumbling blocks along the way, and they are forced to grasp onto traditions that they were given by their precursors, by their family. So if you came from a religious background in general, you are almost forced to hold on to some of them. I still hold on to some of my Roman Catholic beliefs.
I'm like,
Um,
that's a very astute statement. I think about that. My mind was like, well, damn, you didn't have to hit so close.
but let's be honest, like bias, confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance are a hell of a thing, and it's even in science. Even if you just take the straight Einstein approach, you're going to hit a wall at some point because you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
and it's hard to overcome that. It's hard to go, wait a second, what if I turned left? Right.
So this is where I feel like, why religion becomes really important. And I think that's, do we need it? Yes, because the root of religion seems, and this is again my opinion, is
Mm,
that religion is a series of rules. Like you said, I do agree entirely that they're rules. But I think the idea behind these rules is that they are emanating from the points of intelligence that exists as the governing force. Because even if we take, we look to your view where you described how this intelligent governing force has kind of stepped back. If I was the programmer and I wrote the program, and even though it's running and I'm no longer like actively coding it, it's still acting in accordance to the style of
the way
language
you
I've
set
made
it
it.
up, yes.
Right, the way I set it up. So there are aspects to me which could be discerned. It's like if I bake a cake and the cake is sweet, you could possibly think that I am sweet, but that doesn't mean that I am, right? And so, with God or with this grand intelligence, I think that religion is a series of logical rules provided by that. It's
Phrase that
born.
I love hearing so often from Dr. Dan McClellan, who I am absolutely a fanboy
Oh, love him.
of renegotiation, of everyone will renegotiate their holy book, their volume of sacred law, as we Masons like to say, to fit the time and day. Now, do I disagree? No. And even he says that he's a practicing Mormon the last I checked. So he's doing it himself.
Is he really?
Yes, he is. Yes.
What?
Yeah, he's a
What?
Mormon.
Oh,
Yep.
that's questions. I have questions. How's someone that?
And everyone does. And he has, if you go to his TikTok page, at least he has a pinned video where he says, like, yes, I'm a Mormon, I'm part of the Latter-day Saints. I will talk about the scholarly aspects of the Bible, and some of the stuff will go against his own beliefs, but that's the scholarship of the Bible. Like he likes to put the two into two different boxes, and I love the fact that he can do that.
Oh, see, that just, and I respect that, but I also think that there is a challenge to that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now he has his own podcast that he does with a fellow, well, an ex-Mormon, I should say, another man named Dan Beecher. But Dan McClellan, has been on podcasts that are pro-Mormon, that are like very, like we have Masonic podcasts, they have Mormon podcasts. And he talks about that. He talks about his Mormon faith and him growing up. He didn't grow up Mormon. He chose to be Mormon.
Which is even stranger. Yeah. That's always that part where I'm like, so why? What's the hook? What's the sell point?
Absolutely. Why did you, even the questions that you and I had back and forth, why did you choose the faith that you are now practicing? You know,
well, let me ask that to you, right? So what to, you know, you don't necessarily describe it, but like what to you is that, you know, at the end of the day, what brings you the comfort to say, this is what I believe and how I know that that's what's right to believe?
So, in my respect, again, I said, I grew up Roman Catholic. I went to 9 years of Catholic school, received all the sacraments, as they say, that I could through that. So confirmation, Holy Communion, baptism, first confession, all that stuff. Said all the prayers, went to mass on Sundays, everything like that. And then I got to, as George Carlin says, the age of reason, and broke away because I asked too many questions that didn't make sense when the teachers or the nuns or the priests or the deacons came back with answers. I'm like, that doesn't work in the real world.
Right.
Now I still hold on to that there's something else out there, that there is some kind of grand design. I always go back to 1.618, the golden circle, the golden spiral, the fingerprint of God.
Right.
Because you can find that in molecules, the way that they operate. So I like to hold on to that little belief. And I know there's scientists out there that are laughing at my statements, but that's just me. That's how I feel justified in my spiritual practice. And I feel that the way that I think about it, and this is absolute bias, is more pure than someone who has now put human rules to it.
Right.
Like someone who is Islamic or who is Christian, Catholic, who is Judaism. Like, you put human rules to the design of the divine.
Okay, so now let's build on that one, because I think if you were to ask any of these religions, they'd be like, well, these aren't human rules. Now, I can't speak for Christianity or Judaism, because I think in my reading and research of the scriptures, it's led me to be like, there are clear scriptorial conflictions, which make it a difficult point to argue. If I was reading a research paper and it disproved itself or provided evidence within it that conflicted that thesis, then it's hard for me to accept the credibility of that as an argument. This is just me. So when I look at the Islamic view, it emanates from this aspect that these rules are not man-made, but they are emanating from that intelligent being. And so that's where it's hard to, so like, if I'll use an example. In Islam, there is especially in the West, there's a hard perception about the suppression of women or the female form in general. Like,
that's like Sharia law, though. Like, that's
right.
Extreme.
Well, yeah. So, but let's the word, it's fun. So the etymology, the root of the word Sharia means it's the quickest way for water to flow.
Okay.
It's the easiest path. And so it's aspected that as a law or legal system, it's the easiest way for a community to function.
Okay.
In the same way that
I can understand that etymology and that way of thinking. Again, going back to the patriarchal, this worked for ancient people.
Okay, so yeah, so let's push that to say, what would separate us as modern people from ancient people? because the system as it was provided isn't based off of a cultural interpretation, but is based off of the, I wouldn't even say the interpretation, but the definition of the author. So it's like when you read the patent for toilet paper, it goes one way. Somebody can have a different interpretation. They'd be like, no, I put mine this way. I do this with mine. Well, that's
when
fine.
The patent was made,
but
it said it goes this way.
The patent says this. And so for me, when I look at two things, one, which is scholarly evidence. If we were to take everything that we collectively have as people and say that how do we prove if something is right or if it is wrong? This system can and should be applied to religion. And if that religious rule can't pass the test, then it can't be accepted as what I would say is like a rule from the divine, right? If God gave you a rule, it shouldn't be able to be broken. It should make clear sense. So with Islam and the segregation of women, is it, like in the same way with Freemasonry, for a woman, is it easier for you to reveal yourself or to cover yourself? Do you know in which space is the driving purpose behind it would be self-expression, or is it self-satisfaction? So we talk about the male-dominated society. In Islam, the aspect of protecting or covering a woman would not be male domination, but would be emphasis upon feminine protection or governance. There's a perspective is where did the ideology become that to reveal oneself was freedom? Like when you're cold outside, what do? You cover up. When you are exposed to the sun, you cover up. If it's hot outside, you seek shade. There is a natural desire from your native state. When you're a baby and you're born naked, but the first thing that we do innately is to cover ourselves. So there is an evolution which drives us that we can't exist as we are. But societally, we've developed a preference which says that we get to choose that.
So I'm going to offer a counter to that, at least the clothing aspect of it. Yes, when we are born, we have an instinct to cover up no matter where we are. However, once we start growing, even animals shed their fur when it gets hot out. They remove the warmth thing. So why would you not at least, maybe not reveal yourself completely, but have quote unquote more revealing clothing?
Well,
in
so
that respect.
Yeah, no, and actually I think that's an incredibly
and to continue to piggyback off that, that's when the whole patriarchal idea comes back of, if a woman, again going to this binary, if a woman reveals too much of herself, it's going to excite the man. Well, that's the man's problem.
Okay, but is it because evolutionary?
Yes, in my mind, yes.
Yeah. So I think let's keep this. We're going to take advantage of this as there's a slight commercial break.
Going back to the binary, we have the blonde and the brunette.
Your favorite Hollywood couple back again to entertain your digital faces. When we talk about Sharia law, in particular, women being covered as a convention, that I think when I, as a husband, as a father, which I know you can relate to both of these things, right? In my opinion, it seems logical to think like, would you want the women in your life to go out exposed or modestly dressed? I didn't trust me. I know what state you're in, and I've met your wife. She scares me to this day. So I understand what I'm asking you. We're going to speak in purely the hypothetical, okay?
Okay. And this is me being a fence sitter, okay? I love my wife. I've always loved my wife. I think my wife is the hottest thing ever. I don't care about your wife.
Facts.
I want to show her off. Whether that means because now here goes back to my comment about it's the man's problem. Okay, because there are certain men out there or individuals who are attracted to females and the female body type. Let's use our good vernacular here. Who are attracted to the more burlesque, where the less you show, the more they're turned on. And then, of course, there is the more overwhelming majority of individuals who the less you have on, the more attractive you are.
Right.
It doesn't matter to me what my wife wears. I'm attracted to her. So if I think she looks good in an outfit, no matter how revealing they may be, I'm not talking about pasties or something like that, but she's still attractive. I'm going to show her off and go, this is my wife.
Oh,
You know,
and there's no question, right? So, but what my question is like, what is a greater flex, right? You have a wife that dresses exclusively for you, who reveals exclusively for you, who dresses in her finest and her best, who puts on her jewelry for you and you alone, or for somebody who does, and again, for the show, for everybody. Now, I look at it to say, not any judgment on you or your space. I think it's like me personally. I don't I don't want my wife going out and being the visual objectification of another man, because I know the shit that has gone through my head. Horrific things at times.
oh,
And
oh yes, oh yes. And again, I understand that point of view, and that's fine as long as you respect her opinion. Does she like, so we're getting into that whole body dysmorphia type thing.
so when we live, so even with body dysmorphia, like where does that come from? It's like, because if you feel uncomfortable in your body, why is it that you have to reveal more of it or show more of it in order
That's
to?
not that. See, no, 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 no. You don't have to. That's just it. You are uncomfortable in your body, no matter what. You have individuals like my sister, for instance, who suffers from body dysmorphia. It doesn't matter what she's wearing. She's not comfortable in her skin. She could
Right,
be the biggest wig to the largest human. She's
right,
not comfortable in her skin.
okay,
And this doesn't go to any kind of trans thing. This is just body dysmorphia in
right,
general.
okay. No question that this as a mental perception exists as a huge factor on
Mm-hmm.
how we dress ourselves, how we mask ourselves, how we engage with
Oh,
other
yes. The
people.
masking.
Like,
That's
yeah, the self-perception is huge. My question is, what is the value in creating a community and culture that is rooted in that objectification? And I'm not saying that that's why the individual's doing it, right? If you investigate certain kinds of like sexual kinks, there is trauma which is associated with that as a foundation point in someone's like developmental years. There's no challenge as to say that the way they're choosing to express this or handle this as a therapy or form of self-expression is valid. It's absolutely valid because it's the way that the route that they've chosen to take. What I would challenge is we say that the root of religion and the root of a society is to be a continuing structure that is not, that's able to overcome variables that would, overcome an individual. Like if it broke the little man is a society and a community, we can overcome that. I guess the society is the vehicle which navigates the community, to put the
right.
words in the right places.
Right.
But it seems like it would be better to create something which preserves it. And if women didn't have this pressure to have to overcome their body dysmorphia through the satisfaction or gratification of other people, but instead the person to whom they're supposed to, I would say like you, right? If your
Mm-hmm.
wife, again, this is all just in the theoretical. I'm not saying shit about your wife. She's proud
No,
to
I
been a
understand.
black
I
woman.
understand. Believe me, I
Like
do.
the root of like the only place that she's gonna I would say should be deriving her sense of like personal beauty or satisfaction in that space, which be from the person who is given to her in the same way that she chose you, you chose her. There's an assignment here where you're choosing, like, your opinion matters to me, not the opinion of every random stranger walking down the street, not the opinion of the people who feel like I need to look like their standard, but that I should look like your standard. That I should, like, does this make my husband happy? Because he's the one who sees me. He's the only person who gets this.
Okay, so then what about the entire mating aspect before you are with your wife?
Right. Okay. So this is where I look, is to say that, is the goal, when in nature, when animals are given evocative traits, or they're given things which are colorful, they're given they stand out. What's the purpose for this? It's an increased ability to mate. It's an
Yes.
increased ability
Yeah.
of attraction. So when a woman goes out and they reveal themselves and they're deliberately dressing in a way, and I'm not going to say to make men happy. No, it's purely for them. No
Mm-hmm.
question, right? It doesn't change the fact that the man, the biological thing that is looking for visual flags and cues to understand next steps of primal instinct, is going to key off of those. Like that's in their DNA. And it's not just as men, like biological, that masculine progenitor force in nature has
So
this.
okay, so then we'll play on this. We'll continue this thread. Then it comes down to consent. The idea of consent. So we have two single individuals, one of whom is, for lack of a better term, showing off because they mate the mating role. And this podcast has now become the stereotypical alpha bro now. I feel sorry. But we're for the lack of a better, one is showing off for mating purposes. Now the other party
But that feels
involved
good to say.
that is showing interest in it, now it becomes a thing of consent. Because yes, let's be honest, we're men, we're ooga boogas, when it comes to gorgeous women. And the thoughts that go through our head are wrong. And we, especially the two of us in this room, understand that it is. And we are not going to go up to that incredibly hot woman and just start trying to mess with her. We may speak to her. We may try to start a conversation with her.
Right.
But if she were to shut us down, what would your response be? Now
That's
she's
it.
no, that's it. That no means
right.
no.
Right.
That's where it comes from. So what I'm trying to say is, like, so for the single, why are you trying to separate the woman who's expressing herself as a single person? Why does she all of a sudden, now that she has someone, have to not express herself anymore?
Well, so this would be in the sense of the purpose. If we use your analogy, it's because the reason that you expressed yourself was not necessarily expression, but was for the purpose of sexual copulation. It was for the purpose of, you finding your part, finding your mate, finding the person who was
Do
attracted to you.
animals change?
Say it again.
Do animals change though? For this, like
change
do
what?
animals? So when two birds finally do find a mate,
Right.
does one of them now physically change after they found their mate?
That's a fair point of biology. I would personally say no.
They don't.
They don't. But you look at the community. This is that space where I say you look at the societal system, right? You look at the space where the rules are given into each societal system, that which matches them. So within birds, within nature, there are certain creatures which pair for life, and others which don't. Right. So there are moments where, while the female she still presents the mating colors, she's not seeking another mate.
No.
She's not going,
she's going to turn down all suitors.
Right. Yes. So in human society, whereby we have reason, logic, control, and the conscious knowledge of, like, our own nature, right? We have it's not the ugga in the cave. I've captured this one, and we have a very organized and understood system of how we work. So even with this understanding, we still create opportunities for relationships to develop, which aren't rooted in the mutual benefit of both partners, but they're rooted in what I would say is an animalistic drive and desire. If the purpose of marriage is not, I would say,
then we're dealing with the philosophic debate of, now we're getting into cheating, and now we're getting into infidelity and things like that.
Well, so here's where I wouldn't even call it cheating and infidelity. This is where I look to say that there is an intended way that people are supposed to operate. And if we deviate from that,
yes, there should be. There should be, but I don't believe that we should narrow it down to whether or not clothing matters.
Okay, but so
that's what I'm equating it to.
All right, so this is an easier point in the sense that, like, if clothing matters in the same way that if we were just intellectual beings, then it would just be a logic or reason argument. If we were just physical beings, then it would just be a matter of what was, like, the best in regards to physical survivability or communal, but we're not. We are, in fact, these unique, I wouldn't necessarily call them triune beings, but in Masonry, we see this analogy used to say that we are a physical, a mental, and a spiritual being. Or yes. A physical, a mental, and an emotional. If we took one, if I made emotional and spirituality kind of synonyms to each other, since emotions are that vehicle you engage with chemical, I don't know. There's a word for that. But I would emphasize that. Yeah. Oh, see, we need the flow. Give me them waves. I would lean in to say that, like, there is a way that our societies are supposed to be governed that is driven in the best benefit of them, and that way isn't it. It's a whole, like, if you look in nature, if you look at an animal, that animal fits perfectly within its ecosystem, unless it was an invasive one that, for some human, in like zebra clams, like, there's a number of them that you're like, well, clearly that was a mistake, but why did that happen? It wasn't
because we got involved
with it. So that's what it says, like the natural way that people would be intended to exist without the fucked up societal intervention that we have by, you mentioned, what you mentioned was a patriarchal and a commune or a consumer based, like all of these variables, which have deviated vastly away from the religious model, don't serve us any better.
Oh no.
So when you question, do we need religion? Well, we need something, and non-religion didn't work. Liberalism didn't work when it came to, the individual choice, because people choose what benefits them and not what benefits the community. There was a point in time where our grandparents and great grandparents, when they got married to each other, it had nothing to do with love.
Yeah.
It was about, are we able to continue?
It was a marketing choice.
Right. And I would argue that this is closer to a true religious model in the purpose of the marriage than what we have today. We have today a lot of people who say, well, this is what I like, this is what I want, and it's got to look like this and feel like that. And that's great. But all of those choices and preferences, they deviate away from the purpose. Like if a spouse, what is the purpose of a spouse? I would ask that to you.
That all depends on the agreed upon, what the parties agreed upon.
Okay. So
evolution. We'll use my sister as an example. She doesn't want kids. She does not want to reproduce. Now, I don't know whether or not she's even physically able to. There's been discussion that she may not be able to. But she doesn't want kids. So she's in this relationship and eventually will be married to this man purely out of an emotional connection to this person.
Right.
Somewhat financial, obviously, because I think that that's just part of our society.
Okay, but that's what I want to build on right here is that we talk about today that there is a disparity between men and women. When you got everybody campaigning for equal rights and equal, and I'm not saying that I agree with that. What I'm saying is that there is distinct differences between men and women, and if you say that they're capable of doing the same things, you're wrong. They're not. They are entitled to the same rights. When you consider the rights of individuals, the rights of freedom, the rights of property, the rights of prosperity, the rights of happiness, the rights of everything that we deem as a value to you have that right. But I don't think it's fair to put you in the same class, because what a man is capable of doing and the way he's societally received is different than the way a woman is received. And so if you try to take one out of one spot and put them into another spot, you run into conflictions like, why is there a pay wage difference? You'd be like, oh, it has to do with this. I'm not going to argue that it comes from a long line of a culture, but there's also a reasoning behind it. There is not the same value associated with their time in that industry, in that avenue, as a male is.
So then, if we're going to go this feminist route, you have two CEOs. They've spent equal time in their field. They have equal schooling. Literally, the only difference is one is male, one is female. Why is the female earning less?
Because her ability to be in the leadership position is not, I wouldn't say it is not as efficient. I would just say that's not what she's designed to do. I don't mean she's not designed to be in control. I think the woman is designed to be in control. I don't think she's designed to lead. If you have a crowd of 1,000 people, 50-50 men, 50-50, it's divided perfectly. And a woman stands up and they start talking, the level of attention you get is going to be 50%.
Joan of Arc would tend to disagree.
Okay, but
Eleanor Roosevelt would tend to disagree.
Take each one of these. No, the thing is, this is an easy argument for me because just make it a proportion. Take the amount of women, like those Joan of Arc. How long of the time difference between Joan of Arc and Eleanor Roosevelt? Right? Okay. An enormous one. Now, these are not the only two within that space, but if you took every single female leader in a position and compared them to every single male, you'll find that there's still a smaller.
Why do you believe that is? Why do you feel that history
reflects that?
Yeah.
Because there is a historic precedent to the success of one being in that position versus the other. Now, I'm not, because you look at Hawaii to say that. I'm not saying that a woman can't be in leadership. You can look at their African tribes, which have gone to show that the women are actually the leader. They are the mambo. I'm not, and this is that space where I say that a woman has a right to be in control. She that for all intents are like, she's the neck. The man is the
Mhm.
head. She decides, quote, Greek wedding, like that there is a relationship between the male and the female, and they can't be separated from each other, but you can't put one on top of the other. It doesn't go neck, and it doesn't go head and then neck. It's neck and then head. It's an intentional relationship. So even with your sister, where they don't want kids, the purpose of a marriage isn't necessarily about the furtherment of like making more children. It's about the preservation of the societal system. So in order for your sister to be able to do what she needs to do in society, she needs to have somebody who can financially support her to cover the disparity. Because to a certain degree, she's going to be capable of doing things that the husband is not, but he will be able to receive and make more money. In other words, to support her doing the things that she wouldn't be able to receive the financial return for. And this is the root of the relationship, is that a man and
what
a woman
about in same-sex relationships?
So this is what I would argue is the danger in a same-sex relationship. Now, I don't make this point saying I enjoy it or I like it or it's something that I want to like choose. I say that when I look at it scholarly, academically or historically, it does not further the system in the way that a heterosexual relationship will. What I would mean by that is that if you have a man who is representing female, and not even representing, I'm going to mess my words up here. If you have a homosexual relationship between two men or two women, the dynamics of a relationship, like in magnetism, in nature, is positive and negative. If you look at the physical autonomy between a male and a female, you have a plug and a socket. There is an innate unity between these two parts. Within a male and a male, you don't have that. Within a female and a female, you don't have that. Because especially when you take the innate biological purpose intended for the different organs which the body has. There's a biological intention, and then there's a human intervention. Systemically, we can attribute more negative change in our culture to the acceptance and allowance to same-sex relationships than I would say than the objection to it.
And this is where we disagree. This is getting into dangerous ground, and I'm really I don't want to start lashing out, because the talking points that you're using are coming from that steeped in religion, patriarchal society that has evolved from time immemorial, which is something that liberalism and the modern person is trying to overcome. As the joke I made on one of your TikToks, tradition is just peer pressure from dead people.
Right.
So now, but to try and use the argument of evolution and copulation regarding same-sex marriage, you have now just invalidated my sister, because I just told you the same thing, that she can now not, or possibly cannot have children. So they're in a relationship. In that case, they're in a relationship for financial means. So then why would the same-sex couple not be in the same kind of relationship? They're obviously not going to have children. Yeah, they can adopt, things like that. But in the biological term, they cannot have children. So then maybe they're in it for a financial, on top of the genuine love that they have for each other.
So, and it's important to separate, I'm not attacking your sister or anybody who is having these beliefs. You can disagree with a belief and not be disagreeing with people who are electing to hold that belief. Right. And so when we evaluate the root of my argument, it's not based off of a patriarchal view, because my tradition and my space does not come from patriarchal. It comes from matriarchal. It comes from a feminist perspective. My argument comes from when I say an evolutionarily one, ones where it says when we look within nature, when we look within the recorded human systems that we have, the historical evidence, the genetic evidence, like when we look at this and we evaluate what creates a functioning human, right? Not just one, but the society of humans, right? The societies which venerated and like they started, there's an expression, it's like if a society starts stoic, they will end the opposite of it, but they will, there's a word, I can't remember it, They elect a path which is prioritizing pleasure and personal liberty. And that's a complete counter from where they begin. So when I make my argument about, somebody who's in a same-sex relationship, there's no question as to how you love somebody or how you choose to express that. There is a biological aspect to it where you could say there's biologically, when you eat bad stuff, what happens to your body? Bad stuff. It's not so much like up for debate. Like, I really like chips. I really like them. So when I eat them, something bad doesn't happen. My body doesn't take a negative consequence. It's an inevitability. If it's not a good thing and you put it into you, it's not a good thing. We want to choose a personal point of preference. And this is where I think it's dangerous it's where I don't think any of us is qualified to be able to make the judgment of what is right and what is wrong and why we need religion. Because the root of religion is a divinely inspired law. And why is it divine? Well, that's where each religion has a different tradition as to say why there is. But I do think that you can scholarly approach that to determine if it is valid or if it is not.
Okay. And then my final point, at least when it comes to homosexuality, at least in the Bible and also in Judaism, is the idea that we now know as homosexuality did not exist in the same social framework as it did anciently. Anciently, and even if you take like India as a culture, not as a religion, the idea of having a young boy or a man that is more effeminate in general to be a slave for sexual purposes was a power trip. It was emasculating the male. The person on the bottom was the one that power was being taken away from.
Right.
So you can argue that like with your argument that the bottom, as they say, has power taken away from them in a what we now consider today homosexual relationship, which of course we're going back to, we're trying to compare two different times. We as a species have evolved philosophically.
Biologically, we haven't. Philosophically, yeah. And I think the root of like how we have evolved evolutionarily, how we have evolved societally, like if you look at our history, yeah, we have evolved, but what hasn't changed is that we still need each other. Men can't have babies with other men, women can't have babies with other women. Like we have to have each other. If you drew the line and made it clear and distinct and said only men here and only women here, we would both die. We both wouldn't be able to
Yes,
continue. So when I look at
but if you use that binary,
right,
you are now removing the entire thing of, and again, it's today's society. If we lived if society at large was more accepting in general, and say a cisgendered stereotypical family had their way, and all of a sudden they financially could not support another child, but the woman is now pregnant, what happens? Say that woman wants to go through with the pregnancy. That baby is now not going to be that baby is now a financial liability. That woman, that family, now has the option in this utopian society that I'm imagining to give that baby up for adoption. And that baby could be given to a homosexual couple and raised, quote unquote, properly, a horrible term, but you understand. That baby could grow up not homosexual, obviously. That's the child. That is what happens to the child. But that child still will grow up with parents, loving parents, that will give them the morals and the skills to survive.
right.
Right. So I don't think that while I think that yes, there is a certain aspect of what you are describing to be true. Yes, biologically, you need a male and a female to reproduce at the end of the day. I don't believe that as a society, we should keep it that binary, because they're, as you have stated, we are more than animals. We are capable of logic and reason and rhetoric. So if a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, want to love each other because that is their sexual proclivity, they also have the ability to take on a burden from a quote unquote normal, heteronormal couple that may not have been able to support it.
No question. And I don't disagree with any of your points in regards to that, as like in a utopian space, this is something that should function, that it should work, nor that people have a right to make a choice over the liberty of their own bodies. Honestly, I think the fact that we all have the right to make the wrong decision, whatever that decision is a blessing. Like
You've got to learn somehow.
You
You
have
only
to.
learn through mistakes.
You have to. And that's what I want to emphasize, that I think religion and why it's important is because religion is a consistent system. Now, I don't mean all religions. I mean the root of what religion means. And the question we're asking with this episode is not, is there a particular religion that's right?
No.
No, that's not it, because that we're not qualified to make that. We're schmucks. Uggos here. The aspect of this is, do we need religion? Do we need a set of divinely inspired rules that we can agree upon we should follow? And I think for me, the answer is yes.
The authoritarian in me says that everyone needs rules. You need some set of guidelines. And it kind of goes along with my own thoughts on spirituality, that ultimately there are guidelines set. Maybe not ones that were written down in a book by man 2,000 years ago, but there were guidelines set. Even science has guidelines. Gravity only affects us at a certain percentage, as it does to outer and further in space and space-time, things like that. There are still guidelines. Humans need guidelines. I need guidelines. That's my neuro spicy brain. I need boxes.
Right.
Whether or not the individual gets them through a religious practice, some people need it. Some people absolutely need a firm religious hand, or just a firm set of rules in general. Look at the success stories that you may see in the military. You hear about the guys that were, screw up kids, and then military, and yeah, they're still screw ups, but they get out of the military and now they're different. They might have been screwed up from war and whatnot, but they're not the same screw up that they were then. They weren't the ones going to jail and destroying property and whatnot. Now it's just PTSD, unfortunately. But yes, rules are needed, and religion offers those rules. So if you were going to set up a culture, not so much a society, but a culture that can guide a society, then yes, I believe that a religion could be helpful in that respect. That religion, however, needs to be open enough and not rigid to allow for certain nuance to happen.
Well said. Fucking well said. I couldn't have asked for a better, sum
I
up.
think that, and I think that's what boils down to that whole little disagreement we were having before. I think that's what my main thing is. Like, it was too rigid. It was too rigid of a rule.
Yeah, no. So here's the thing where I don't disagree with you, that that you can't come into it fucking rigid. You got to come in soft. You got to work up to the firmness.
You got to lube it up.
Bite the pillow. I'm going in dry. That's where we're at right now.
Listen, I just turned 40. I don't need to hear that from my doctor.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. If you've made it this far, remember that our opinions are just that, opinions. And like assholes, everybody has one and they all stink. Have a beautiful night. Brother, any final closing words?
Be kind to one another. Do good unto all men. And by men, I mean humans.
No, he doesn't.